Classic slasher movies were arguably the biggest source of inspiration for the developers of Dead by Daylight, and since with some rare exceptions all of them are set in the modern era, it's only logical that their first killers were also from the modern era. However, the more they expanded their roster, the further back in time they went, until at some point in early 2019 they announced that their new killer, the Plague, was going to be an ancient Babylon priestess out of all things. For those people who played DBD without going into too much detail of what was happening behind the scenes, this choice was just mildly odd. But for the nerds like myself who didn't miss a single dev stream, it was just downright blasphemy, because it directly contradicted what they said earlier about having no intention of adding characters from super old times, because they wouldn't fit into the modern setting of the game. Anyhow, the PTB for the Plague started on the 6th of March, and when I saw her in action, I was flabbergasted, because not only did she have voice lines, which made her the first ever talking killer, but she also had two different powers: Vile Purge, aka the green puke, which infected survivors and made them unable to heal other than by cleansing in one of your fountains, and Corrupt Purge, or the red puke, which she obtained from the already used or corrupted fountains and which allowed her to injure survivors from a distance. The latter turned out to be so strong that it instantly made a lot of players view the Plague as the better version of the Huntress. However, their opinion changed once it became clear that she had almost no control over when exactly during the match she got to use the red puke, or what was even worse, whether she got to use it at all. The thing is that unlike today, on the PTB by default the Plague didn't start the match with one fountain already corrupted. For this she actually had to bring either Blast Apple or Ashen Apple. So basically the only way to get access to the red puke was to infect survivors and wait until they started cleansing, which a lot of them deliberately chose not to do in order to completely deprive you from using your second ability and force you into playing the M1 simulator. Yes, this way the whole team had to stay one shot for the entire match, but it was infinitely better than having to deal with one of the nastiest ranged attacks in the game, especially in the open areas. But okay, suppose you were going against a team that didn't mind cleansing. You think then it would be free red puke all you want? Well, yes, but only if you could make it so that the survivors were constantly getting infected throughout the match. And that was a job easier said than done, considering how inefficient the green puke was on the PTB. First off, you know this thing when instead of trying to infect survivors directly, the Plague walks around the map and pukes on gens, pallets, and other interactable objects so that if survivors touch them, they automatically get infected from them. Well, on the PTB it was almost impossible to pull off, because back then the green puke disappeared from the environment much faster than today. Namely, and it's not a joke, after just 20 seconds. So unless you had one of the add-ons which increased this time, the chances of the infection still being active by the time survivors stumbled upon whatever you puked on were pretty much zero. You could increase these chances by puking on something that was urgent for survivors, like for example a hot gen or a hex totem. But even then, if they were absolutely not in the mood for dealing with your green puke, they could simply wait it out. It wasn't always a good idea. For example, you probably wouldn't want to wait out a regressing gen that's one tap from getting finished, but a random hex totem you accidentally found 1 minute into the match, why not? Second, originally when survivors were interacting with infected objects, it didn't increase the speed at which their sickness meter was filling up, so in order to get broken they would have to spend 50 seconds sitting on an infected gen. And just so you understand how long it was, at that time it was enough to complete about 60% of a gen, or an entire gen if you were working on it with someone else. And here's my favorite part: if you downed an infected survivor, you couldn't even hook them without blowing your chance of getting the red puke off of them, because believe it or not, on the PTB, hooking infected survivors used to completely reset their sickness meter, meaning that once they were unhooked, they were no longer broken, just injured and infected, which gave them 40 more seconds before they finally had to cleanse. And like that wasn't enough, it was also impossible for survivors to pass the infection to each other, which means that healthy survivors could safely unhook their infected teammates, and the infected teammates could heal their injured teammates with no risk of snowballing the infection whatsoever, something that happens on the live servers all the time. Basically, with all these drawbacks and restrictions, the only way to make use out of your green puke was to find a survivor, infect them, let them go, and hope that they would go straight for one of the fountains. Now, was all this really worth the effort? Well, yeah, but actually no, because at the end of the day, your reward was just 45 seconds of the red puke. Not even 1 minute like today, just 45 seconds, minus the time you had to spend in order to find someone to use it on, the time you needed to counter their shift and W, and there you go. You have like 15 seconds left and you still haven't hit anyone. On top of it all, the original Plague's power felt super sluggish and awkward in general. For example, she used to move much slower while charging both the green and the red puke. Just like with all killers with the projectile throwing mechanic, at that time the puking animation used to have a 0.1 second longer start startup. Every time after she stopped using the green puke, she used to slow down to 2.3 meters per second for several seconds. And last but not least, she couldn't tap the ability button to quickly spit her green puke on something. She actually had to hold the button, charge the ability for a little bit, and only then it would allow her to shoot for as long as you filled up the charge bar. Tapping the ability button would simply cancel the animation. So basically, we're in version 3.0, not exactly 2.6 PTB, but yeah, that's the closest that I can give you. And basically, that's how puking works in this version. If you tap it, she's gonna make this, you know, vomiting sound, but like nothing's gonna come out. And also she's gonna slow down. Yeah. But like she's not puking. And for her to puke, you actually need to like charge the bar for like at least a couple of millimeters. No, that's not enough. Yeah, like this. Now she's gonna puke. The only positive thing about her that I was able to dig up was that she used to have a slightly faster movement speed while walking with her green and red puke fully charged up, which was a pretty consolation prize considering all the things I've listed above. And you wanna know what a good prize is? Seeing my videos in your subscription feed, duh. So make sure to subscribe right now if you still haven't. We're super close to 20k. Having such an underwhelming base kit, the PTB Plague was a disgustingly add-on dependent killer. However, sometimes even picking the right add-ons didn't help, because a lot of them were not exactly good too. For example, Limestone Seal and Hematite Seal used to increase the duration of environmental infection by a ridiculous 5 and 10 seconds respectively. Same applied to Exorcism Amulet and Devotee's Amulet, 5 and 10 seconds bonus to the duration of the red puke. Iridescent Seal, on top of giving you the red puke every time survivors completed a gen and reducing its duration, also used to massively slow you down while holding the red puke. Then there were several add-ons that were not weak per se, however, instead of giving you some really interesting and powerful tools like they do in the live version, they used to simply improve some of your base kit parameters. For example, a Libidinum Incense, instead of revealing survivors' auras after they cleanse, used to slightly increase the movement speed while charging the green puke. Prayer Tablet Fragment, which increases the infection gain from objects by 100% in exchange for making the green puke not affect survivors directly, used to slightly increase the activation speed of your fountains along with the movement speed while holding the red puke. Incensed Ointment, instead of making survivors scream every time you grab the red puke, used to slightly increase the movement speed while charging the green puke and moderately decrease its cooldown. Vial-O-Medic, which instead of increasing the flight speed of the green and red puke, used to increase the speed of the survivor's sickness meter. Of course, not all of the add-ons were like this. Some of them were actually stronger than their modern versions. The most notable of them were Worship Tablet and Black Incense. Worship Tablet used to increase the Plague's movement speed while holding the red puke by 6.8%. This, coupled with how fast the speed used to be by default, literally allowed her to walk faster than if she wasn't holding the red puke. Yeah, get on the other side and go. Hold it. And woo! I'm zooming. Bro, I'm zooming. And that's the nerfed version. That's the nerfed version. Imagine what it was like on the PTB. And Black Incense used to reveal the auras of vomiting survivors for 5 seconds instead of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's about 5 seconds, man. It's actually, bro, that's legit. That's better than the doctor. That's better than the doctor. Oh my god, why am I getting stuck? 5 seconds? And you puke like every 5 seconds, bro. I can literally, it's like free wall hack. By the end of the PTB, it became clear that the Plague couldn't be released in such a disastrous state. And that's why before officially introducing her in patch 2.6.0, Behavior made some very important changes to her base kit. First thing they did was buff the green puke, so that it was much harder for survivors to avoid. For this, they increased the duration of infection on objects to 35 seconds and made it so that the survivor's sickness meter no longer reset after being hooked. Along with this, they gave the Plague the ability to infect the exit gate switches. Of course, it didn't make that much of a difference because it has a super limited usage, but at least it added a little more consistency to her power. Next, the devs made 2 significant improvements to the red puke mechanic. They increased its duration to 60 seconds and made it so that when survivors use up all the fountains on the map, they reset and automatically give you the red puke as if you just grabbed it from one of the fountains manually. And don't get me wrong, these changes were more than welcome, especially the first one, because now you didn't have to worry that you would run out of the red puke before you even found a survivor. Unfortunately though, they didn't address the main issue of the red puke, namely that the survivors could still hold it hostage by not cleansing. Also in this patch, the devs rebalanced the Plague's movement speeds in order to make her feel less busted during chases for both sides. Basically what they did was make her a little faster while charging her power at the expense of slowing her down while holding it. This way, when she used it in loops on the survivors that were right in front of her, she no longer gave them too much time to dodge it by running behind the corner. But at the same time, if they were on the opposite sides of the loop and she had her power fully charged, she had to spend much more time in order to catch up and get a good angle for a shot. The funny part is that even after this nerf, if you used Worship Tablet, your resulting movement speed while holding the red puke would still be faster than the standard 4.6 meters per second. But hey, it's not DBD if something's not broken. The last thing the devs did for the Plague in this patch was increase the amount of blood points she earned for the events in the deviousness and brutality category, because on the PTB it was so low that only a miracle could help you max these categories out. The situation with brutality specifically was so bad that 2 months later, Behavior actually had to revisit it separately and further improve the scoring. Next, in patch 3.2.2, the devs increased the responsiveness of puking by making the delay before the animation starts 0.1 second shorter. This update wasn't exclusive to the Plague, but rather it happened as a general buff for all killers with the projectile throwing mechanic. See, the problem is that I can't really tell if they really increased the responsiveness. Because, like, oh my god, you still cannot tap your power in this version. Still have to, like, hold it a little bit. Like, it's pretty much... Oh my god, it's pretty much the same for me. Come on! Yeah. In 2020, the Plague received only one update, which nonetheless had a huge impact on her gameplay. Patch 3.6.0 made her start with one corrupted fountain by default, which meant that now she had at least one guaranteed usage of the red puke per match, and she didn't even need survivors to cleanse for this. This also made it way more risky for survivors to stay broken the entire match, because at any point in time the Plague could choose to activate her red puke and punish them for trying to steal her power. The following year turned out to be a lot more eventful for the Plague. First, in patch 4.7.0, the devs improved the colors of the sickness meter on the HUD so that colorblind survivors could better see how much time they had left before becoming broken. Next, in patch 5.1.0, they removed the useless ability to infect breakable walls, since survivors had no means of interacting with them anyway. Yeah, so I'm just gonna puke on it real quick. All the way, yeah. Touch it. Can you like rub against it? Like, just move, like, left and right. Nah, it doesn't work. Though it's kind of smoking. Look at the bottom. It's kind of smoking. Patch 5.3.0 increased the movement speed during the green puke cooldown to 3.6 meters per second, and made it so that your power doesn't get cancelled when you let the button go too early, and instead continues to charge until it hits the minimum threshold for shooting. Next, it further increased the duration of environmental infection to 40 seconds and made the survivor's sickness meter increase twice faster when they're interacting with infected objects. Additionally, it increased the cleansing time from 6 to 8 seconds, which I personally find a little questionable, cause think about it, the longer survivors take to cleanse, the longer the Plague has to wait for her power. Not even to mention that longer cleansing time might simply discourage some people from cleansing at all. Last but not least, in this patch, Behavior rebalanced most of the Plague's add-ons, which was about time actually, considering how much her biscuit had changed by then. For the most part, all the add-on changes were justified, especially the Worship Tablet nerf, which finally made it impossible to exceed the default movement speed while holding the red puke. The only thing I couldn't really understand was what they did to Prophylactic Amulet. I mean, decreasing the number of fountains on the map by 2? Seriously? So that I had less potential sources of the red puke? How is this even useful? Please, Plague mains, explain it to me in the comments. The last change for today was a failed attempt to nerf Incensed Ointment in the spring of 2023. The thing is that apparently the devs thought that tying the effect of this add-on to the size of the Plague's terror radius was a mistake, because she got to combine it with perks like Distressing and make survivors scream through half of the map every time she ingested the red puke. And that's why in patch 6.6.0 they reduced it to only 19 meters, while also rendering survivors' screams stereo. Previously they used to be mono. However, the reaction of the community to this was so negative that 2 weeks later all the changes were completely reversed. And there you go, that's the spot where the Plague is right now. Pretty strong, somehow not very popular, and definitely super annoying to go against, especially if your teammates don't know when to cleanse and when not to cleanse. But that's what it is. I never really knew how to end my videos, so here's an interesting fact instead. If you down an uninfected survivor with a basic attack, hook them, and then puke on them, they will get infected, but they won't be able to spread this infection to other survivors. So whoever comes for the rescue won't get infected from them too. And with that said, I got absolutely no idea what you're gonna do with this information.